Right, welcome back, guys, to another episode. And this week I have the amazing Sam Bleakley. Sam, can you introduce yourself?
Thanks for having me, Ross. So I'm from West Cornwall. I'm born and raised in the Sennin area. And God, it's hard to put a finger on what I do because I juggle a lot of different tasks around surfing. I've stayed in education and got a PhD around travel writing. Went to Cambridge University and studied geography. But during my time at university, my competitive longboard career really took off, and I became sponsored by Oxbow, the big French sportswear company that were really behind longboarding through the 90s and early 2000s. I became a multiple English, British, European champion, and I competed on the world tour, but I also made the connection to work within the surf media. I started to do a lot of magazine writing and editing, and really moved into a bit of a specialism, doing a lot of exploration work with the photographer John Callahan, writing features and being photographed in pretty remote places, surfing around mostly Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. And that led to me getting into film work and developing a travel show called Brilliant Corners, writing a number of books about longboard culture and surfing and travel. And then in the last 10 years, I've made the transition out of competition into working as a commentator. So I commentate for the World Longboard Tour and the ISA World Longboard Championships, and also the ISA World Parasurfing Championships, because I'm also really interested in parasurfing. And I sometimes take on a lot of freelance projects, maybe around museum curation, around editing books, and I also edit an annual longboarding magazine. So that juggle of freelance jobs keeps me super busy. I will admit, I don't make much money with what I do, but it keeps me very close to surf culture. I get to travel lots, and I've now got a family that surf as well. So I'm certainly happy with the life decisions I've made.
Amazing. At the end of the day, that's all anyone can ask for, really, isn't it? Like, let's face it, a lot of us will save up to get our money together to actually go traveling to these places. So if you can actually get paid to do it, then, well, win-win, really, isn't it? Yeah, so I was going to say, you
Yeah, I
always
think
seem
there's a
happy
real
with
art to
things.
that.
So I think we've got a little delay.
Yeah, I think that, there was a little delay there. Is that my side happening?
I don't know. We're both in Cornwall, so it could just be the amazing Cornish signal.
Yeah, so I think
But
that
as
it's
you were
very
saying,
interesting it's really interesting when you're working around the surf industry or travel-based work. From the outside, it looks like there's a lot of kind of glory and good times, but to make that possible, to be able to work through travel is a lot of preparation, it's a lot of networking, it's a lot of pitching like strong ideas to people who may invest in those ideas. And I think the art of doing that, I think I really learned that by studying and going to university, the art of problem solving, of approaching a problem and coming up with like ideas and solutions. Also, I think within the longboard culture, you have to be quite creative about ways you maybe monetize your love of longboarding, because it doesn't have the same level of attention and investment that shortboarding has famously had over the last 40 years. And in some ways that favored me because I've always been one of those types of people who will think outside the box. And I quite like some of the challenges of thinking, how can we make this economically viable, this project that I'm interested in doing? So yes, I think from the outside, a lot of people go, wow, you do this and that. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of structure and a lot of hard work to make things happen.
Yeah, definitely. And what you guys have done is brilliant. I think Longboarder Magazine, bringing that back is a great shout. It's going to help really, so just rekindle things for those that can't get to the beach all the time. Like, I used to love reading magazines. I used to go down Sorted Surf Shop in Bournemouth and just collect up whatever old volumes they have. And I've only recently got rid of them the last couple of years. I don't know, must have had about 150 magazines. Longboard, for wavelength, carve, just a mixture of UK and US magazines, but it's brilliant. You mentioned like exhibitions. Now there's one opened up in Falmouth. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so we have this 2-year-long exhibition that opened in March that is a celebration of 100 years of wave riding in Cornwall, and it's at the National Maritime Museum in Falmouth. And they came to me having done some research about the types of topics that they might do exhibitions on. And when they asked me, I was like, oh my gosh, what an awesome opportunity to delve into the history of wave riding in Cornwall. And what the show does is it has over 100 boards and like thousands of objects if you add up all of the types of things involved. And it really kind of celebrates and charts everything from the earliest days of documented prone bellyboarding in Cornwall and the way that the railways promoted tourism in Cornwall through using imagery of prone bellyboarding to sell holidays to the likes of Bude and Newquay and Polzeath. And then it moves through the earliest kind of pioneers of stand-up surfing in the region all the way through to the fiberglass surfboards of the late 50s and early 60s, and then the shortboard revolution all the way through to our parasurfers and our big wave surfers and our short and longboard champions and our bodyboarders. So it's a mix of culture around Cornish surfing, documented through film and photographs and stories. But there's also a lot of really cool objects, vintage wetsuits, woolen surf suits. As I said, a big mix of boards, including Tim Mellors' 37-foot board that he built in '9, and some artwork on surfboards by the likes of Damien Hirst. And all of the boards were either made in Cornwall or have a very strong Cornwall link in the sense that they were, very important in the narrative of the history of wave riding in Cornwall. And we could have easily done a UK-based exhibition, but hopefully this will stimulate new ones for the Devon scene, for the Wales scene, for the Channel Islands scene, because it's a shared history. The South Coast up in the Northeast as well. There's a long history of, coastal tourism that leads to lifeguarding and swimming. And then there's the emergence of prone surfing on wooden belly boards, and then the stand-up surf culture. And it's a big part of our shared history. So being able to curate this exhibition was brilliant. Being able to go and meet people, collect the items, archive all the images, help write and design the stories. It was like a big project, but a really special one. I think when you get the chance to do history-based projects, it's a real reinforcement of where we've come from, the roots of our surf communities. And you always hope that the next generations coming up have a good sense of the background of what they're kind of evolving into, because I think that helps them realize that a lot of the cool designs we play with have already been tried before. So how can we make them a bit more different, a bit fresher?
That's it. And just good to know where you've come from as well, isn't it, at the end of the day? Easy to get lost in whatever's going on. One of the ways I come across you, because I didn't start surfing until I was 18, 19, so back in around 2003. So by the time I actually really got into it, was reading the magazines, like I said earlier, I was sort of coming into surfing with the likes of Bo Young, Andy Irons, and that sort of generation. I just missed like the momentum generation things, that big surge into shortboarding. That I didn't know who Christian Fletcher was or any of that generation for ages, which seems a bit weird because the guys my age now, around 40, that's who they grew up with. The Cornish surfers who started when they were little groms. I started as just a bigger, heavier grom. So you come onto the scene for me quite early in my surfing life, and I come across Brilliant Corners and heard you commentating for the competitions and such. Now, Brilliant Corners really got me. Like, when I was in Southampton, there was not much surf. It was a way to sort of escape. Can you tell me a bit, like, your opinion, a couple of stories from that show?
Yeah, well, so the Brilliant Corners films, which are a little bit more recent than that period, I started making them in 2012, and I made them up until about 2021, and it's a project that I've done 16 different countries, and they're all kind of hour-long documentaries on the different countries. And the most recent season was produced by the World Surf League, and those shows are free to view on the WSL website, and they're split up into 3 episodes per country normally. And then the middle season was produced by the Wave from Bristol when they were, investing in content, and that's distributed to TV globally. And some of those episodes are on Netflix in the UK. And the original season I did through a mix of funds, but it's distributed by Extreme Video, and that's also viewable on Netflix in the UK and is distributed to television show stations. So the background of doing the Brilliant Corners films was I had traveled extensively from the late 90s until about 2012 with John Callahan, who's a really great adventure travel surf photographer who was from Hawaii, but he had moved out to Singapore in 2000 as a central location to be a bit more adventurous about a lot of his Asian work. And he was really behind emerging surf communities. And because I was interested in writing and was also a professional longboarder, we teamed up very well. And he researched lots of really incredible places to go and document around Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. We would often publish our work in the Surfer's Path. That was one of our main outlets for our premiere of our features. And we were able to do features all over West and East Africa, from the likes of Liberia and Ghana to Madagascar, places like Haiti, places like early days in Hainan, China, South Korea, Malaysia. And some of the places were really off the radar, like Mauritania or Algeria. And as that period started to fade out due to the decreasing funding in the kind of print magazine media, I just made a transition into starting to make travel films. And so in 2012, I did the first Brilliant Corners film in Haiti, and then did ones in Jamaica, Barbados, Liberia, China, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Oman, Mauritania, Philippines, Madagascar, Papua New Guinea, India, Senegal, Algeria, Zanzibar. And I would have kept doing them, but the pandemic got the better of the funding platform. I had a kind of relationship with the World Surf League and some funding from Hydro Flask, and the impact on travel through the pandemic really diluted that. And I've never since been able to kind of reignite the type of funding you need to make the films. I did self-fund a new one in a place called Sao Tome, which I haven't released yet, which was like self-funded, which could lead to a good marketing pitch to do more films. But the premise of the shows is that they are distributed to TV or only on the World Surf League website. So I haven't put them free to view on YouTube, and that has meant that I can earn royalties from them, or the people who've invested into them, to make them a bit more viable financially. And they're basically about engaging with emerging surf communities and just celebrating and learning about places through the local surf community, which is normally really small and pretty grassroots in the places I've done the films. And it's like a travel show in the Simon Reeve or Michael Palin kind of style, if you know those presenters, through the lens of surfing. But it splinters off into learning about food and music and history. And the motivation is to kind of empower the local surfers as ambassadors for their countries and cultures. And, through doing the films on pretty low budgets, I've learned how to edit as well. And yes, I've always worked with a cameraman and an editor, but I've learned the process of pulling the whole thing together. And the adventures that we've gone through to make the films have been epic, because they've been in some gnarly places, like making a film in Haiti in 2012. Haiti's now such an apocalyptic country politically that it's very dangerous to go there, but it has a lot of really nice surf and a very small surf community. But adventures making the films in the likes of Haiti, Mauritania, Algeria, they're pretty gnarly places, and they take like a really good team, good organization, good local contacts. But you also have to like let go when you travel to those types of places. You can't expect anything to go to plan. So you have to be really resilient and robust, and things will go wrong all the time. And you really have to embrace that as part of the adventure. And, a lot of times of the year, I miss those adventures, because that's been a big part of my identity that's driven a lot of my writing and a lot of my work, is being in fairly off the beaten track places with things going wrong, but having to deal with it. And sometimes when I'm at home in Cornwall, it just feels a bit mundane, and I'm like desperately thinking, how can I bring my kids who are now really cool surfers on a crazy adventure to Haiti? Because the adrenaline you get and the fulfillment out of those types of adventures is priceless.
Yeah, I think it's pretty sure it's Senegal that stuck out of my head, and watching one of the kids sort of I'm obviously you didn't quite catch the sound on the video, but I think you must have said, "There, mate, go over, go on my board," and this kid's eyes just sort of lit up, grabs your board, then it cuts into him just falling around on a wave, like just nothing's being taken seriously. It's just pure sort of stoke and enjoyment, and it was absolutely incredible to see. Yeah, there must have been some incredible memories of moments like that. Is there anything that in your mind sticks out just from sort of the stoke of the community?
Yeah, I reckon that you were thinking of a part of the Sierra Leone film where one of the local lads has a go on one of my longboards. I think in that phase of doing the films, it was a bit of a later phase where I really realized how prone surfing has a long history in places all over the world. And once I started to tune in a little bit more to that, I documented that in the films in Madagascar and Papua New Guinea with the World Surf League episodes, and just really connecting how there may well be new stand-up surf scenes, but most of the places with coastlines and long fishing histories have like an ancient culture of just kids playing on wooden boards, broken bits of pirogue or boat, and just learning how to deal with the sea safely through that kind of style of wave riding. But seeing people, stand up surf for the first time is really special. And I think one of the films that really resonated with me was the one I did in Liberia. And I first went to Liberia with John Callahan and a few other travelers, including Randy Rarick, a real legendary Hawaiian shaper and surfer. After the Civil War had ended, we were there in 2005. And we were amongst the first international surf crew to go back into the country post back-to-back civil wars. So it was a raw situation. But since in the 1970s, travelers had honed in on the quality of a long left-hand point break called Robertsport, which is a series of sand-bottom left point breaks, similar in scale to Raglan in New Zealand. The length of the ride and the quality of the wave. Much different environment physically, like rocky headlands and then sand bottom sections. And there's actually like 3 distinct sections at Robertsport, and then like a top section with a kind of beach break. And it's a really world-class wave. And when we first went in 2005 to do like a photo project, meeting some of the kids who had been through Civil War and had kept surfing or picked up a love of surfing from a broken boogie board or a really damaged old board, to see how surfing was like a healing process, that was really powerful. And I went back there to make the Brilliant Corners film in about 2015, and I met some of the kids who are now a bit more grown up that I'd met in 10 years before in 2005. And that was really powerful because they'd kind of become custodians of their community, in the sense they were now working in the emerging beach lifeguarding and surf tourism scenes, where you've got middle class Liberians from the capital Monrovia going out to the coast on the weekend to holiday, swim or have a surf lesson. And you've also got like a flow of traveling surfers who are like camping or staying in a guest house or eating. And just to see the healing process that surfing had given them, and the opportunities locally for them, meaning they didn't have to move away from the coastline they loved. That was like really powerful. And just surfing's bigger and broader than ever before, but in these micro communities where surfing has like a powerful voice, you really notice all the kind of qualities and the powerful opportunities that it gives to people. That stands out as like a really special experience doing the film in Liberia.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds absolutely incredible. And I think obviously travel is one of the best ways to sort of educate yourself, isn't it? And I I've always recommended people, just if you're not sure what you're doing with life, just if you got the funds, even if you haven't, you can just get somewhere, get a bit of work, and just explore, see what's going on. Also, like for me, it's made me realize there's so much more to life than get up, go to work, do this. Like you see how so many other people live their lives. It's absolutely incredible. And the fact that you can have a common sort of interest really opens up, sort of, it breaks down that language barrier as well, doesn't it? Absolutely brilliant. So I also wanted to talk about the mindfulness and surfing. Can you give us a little bit more information on that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of books I've written, one of which is, sells really well. It's called Mindfulness and Surfing, Reflections for Saltwater Souls. And there's another smaller one called Mindful Thoughts for Surfers, Tuning into the Tides. And the link between mindfulness and surfing, I published that first book in 2016 and I'd been commissioned to write a piece for an environmental magazine called Resurgence. And the editor, Satish Kumar, had asked if I was interested in writing something around surfing, environmentalism and mindfulness. And I knew a little bit about mindfulness, but it was that commission that encouraged me to research more about some of the classic literature on mindfulness. And then I was like, wow, this is amazing, because surfing is such a great embodiment of these features of mindfulness, being in the present, but also these other things like positivity, empathy, sharing the experience with others and with nature, and resilience, learning how to kind of come back for more, to get up from the wipeout. So that piece inspired me to start to do a lot of research around those topics. And what I did is I linked it to environmentalism. So it wasn't so much about going into your own head and your own body and just being very self-centered. It was about connecting with the wider shared space that we share when we surf. So inspiring a kind of environmental activism by recognizing that, our mindfulness is with a shared space of the environment. And I called that body mindfulness, to really put us in the mind of the bigger picture of being out in the sea, shared with sea life, shared with other surfers, shared with all of the things that happen around a coastal space. And then that piece inspired a publisher to ask me about doing a whole book about mindfulness and surfing. So it just goes to show, when you get an opportunity to do a little small bit of work, if you come up with something strong or interesting, sometimes other people notice and it can lead to other good work. A bit like if you're a gardener and you do a really good bit of work and then the neighbor notices and employs you to do more, or you're a builder and you build a really nice conservatory and 6 people go, wow, that's beautiful. Can you do one for me? And so I was lucky with that one article. And the book, I just took it further, and it was a brilliant journey researching and writing that book, and it sells really well. It's still easy to buy on all of the bookshops and online platforms. And I think essentially I learned a lot about it as well by being a parent and having my daughter learning how to surf with me. And now I'm going through that same journey with my son. And when you surf with elderly or with children, I think that it strips away all the clutter, and you were reminded of the simple things about how you access the waves, how you do it safely, how you develop confidence. And I think a lot of those things I talk about in the book, which go beyond just, how we learn to surf and engage with the coast and be environmental activists and be mindful, they're also about how we do that safely. And for sure, a lot of that stems from me introducing surfing to my daughter Lola and then my son Ruben, and trying to do it in a way where I wanted them to love surfing like I do, but I never wanted to intimidate them, to bring them into it safely, which is really hard to do in the UK because we don't have warm water. We have to wear a wetsuit all year. If we want to surf in the winter, we're wearing a 5'4" boots, gloves and hood. And the conditions are very changeable. We have rip currents, big tidal ranges. We have a lot of sand bottom waves, which are easy to surf, but you have to really think a lot broader. It's not just about rocking up at a bit of coastline where the water's tropical and just wading out into the sea. I think for British surfers, we have to look at the weather forecast. We have to decide which coast or which spot we're going to go to. We have to think, did we dry our wetsuit from the previous session if we want to, kind of not make it unpleasant to put on our wetsuit. And we also have to use quite a lot of different boards because we have such changeable conditions, from wild, stormy days to the most mellow, smooth, tiny days. And those small days are great for longboards. Those big, wild days, longboards can be really difficult to use. So all of those things really fed into that book. And I still get a lot of positive feedback from it, even though it was printed in 2016. It still seems to be quite timeless. A lot of people message me every few months to say they've read it for the first time. And I'm really stoked that I got the opportunity to do that book. I've written other books before and since, but that's the one that I think brought together the most timeless combination of things that really encapsulate the power of surfing and how it can be used as a form of therapy, why the emergence of things like the Wave Project is so powerful to use surfing as a form of therapy, talking about the rise of para and adaptive surfing, and the strength of small wave surfing, how it's not all about the hero and the biggest days. A lot of really special surfing happens on the smallest, safest days.
Yes, to link into that, you saying there was a post from Stephen Downes the other day. So for those that don't know who Stephen is, by the time this episode comes out, you would hopefully have seen the one that's coming out this coming Tuesday, where I have Stephen on. Stephen's a one-arm surfer. He's hopefully competing with the rest of the para team. And is just a really nice guy in Nuki. I won't go into his full story, that comes out in another episode, but he put a post up the other day, and I think he said he'd managed to do like a 360 spin, I think, on his board. He does a lot of knee boarding, and he managed to do it, and he's been trying, and he went out on a sort of pretty average day, I think, at Watergate, but he managed to do the 360, and he's got this GoPro footage of him doing a spin. Obviously, from that angle, all we see is a lot of white water, but you can tell from his facial expressions when it sort of zones back onto his face, it's just pure stoke. Like, he is so amped up and frothing. You're like, yes, like that is one happy guy. And like you say, like, progression and everything, it comes from, and general happiness and surfing can come from an average day. You just go, I'll pop in for an hour, I'll have a quick session. But I think those where you're not expecting much, when you got them slightly lower expectations, you're so much more relaxed. Like, I know for me, I've gone out and it's been absolutely pumping. It's been maybe North Fistral, and you've got the likes of Alan Stokes, Luke Dillon, all these like high level surfers out there. You're like, for me, I put this extra pressure on, like, I've got to do well because everyone out here is absolutely ripping. But when it's small, it's let's say average, you don't necessarily put that pressure on. You just go out, have a bit of fun, I'll take this board today, should be a laugh. And I think that's when you can progress the most and enjoy yourself the most. So yeah, it's so going into the parasurfing, what's your role with that?
Yeah, love the opportunity to celebrate parasurfing. So in about 2015, I started to write some blog content for the Wave Bristol when they were building the brand in the process of building the surf lake. And I got really interested in doing profiles on the emerging adaptive and parasurfers. So adaptive sports really started to flower from the early 2000s with new levels of funding and the growth of the Paralympics. And in the UK, we quickly had some really world-class adaptive surfers like Peg Leg Bennett from St Agnes. And off the back of doing a lot of writing work celebrating the integrity of global parasurfing, it led to the opportunity for me to work as a commentator with the ISA, which is the International Surfing Association, working at the annual World Parasurfing Championships. And so every year I'll work as one of the host commentators at the broadcast, that in the last few years, the event's been in Huntington Beach. And previous to that, it was in Pismo on the central coast of California. And I also work at the annual English Parasurfing Championships. So I'll probably see Steve up at the Wave for that event pretty soon. The adaptive scene in the UK is very strong. For example, in Cornwall, we've had 3 world champions from parasurfing: Melissa Reed from the visually impaired category, Pegleg Bennett, and Charlotte Banfield. The way adaptive surfing is classified through the ISA is there are 9 different classifications or divisions, and they're connected to the impairment of the surfer. So there's kneeling, there's 3 standing, which is determined from if your impairment is below or above the knee, or if it's an upper body impairment. There's an assisted prone division and a non-assisted prone division. So the assisted is that the surfer will have a pusher and a catcher, and the non-assisted is that prone surfer will be paddling out, catching the waves themselves. And there's also a sitting category. So all of these different styles of wave riding are really interesting because they talk to the variety of boards we've used through history and continue to use, from surf skis to prone boards. And what's very important for the adaptive surfers is how they adapt the equipment to suit their needs. So the use of handles, the different types of materials in the boards, the placement of the fins is really interesting. So you'll notice the prone surfers who may well ride, fairly middle-sized boards, they'll have their fins really far forward on their board, almost in the same position you would see for a wave skier, because most of their driving weight is further up the board to initiate those fin engagements. And they'll also have handles, on the rail or near the nose, but those handles will be very specific to their own adaptation of their impairment and the board and the surfing they want to do. So it's actually like a really progressive element of wave riding culture. And you see people making big performance breakthroughs all the time. One of the exciting rivalries at the moment is in the prone international division between 2 Australians, Kai Colas and Joel Taylor. Both of those surfers have different approaches and they're pushing each other to new levels. And with a British interest, a similar rivalry is happening between Mark Mono Stewart, a famous Australian parasurfer and multiple world champion, and Llewellyn Sponge Williams from the north of Wales. And in the kneeling division, those two have been pushing each other. And it's really exciting to be around the adaptive sports community. And we were hoping that surfing would get in the Paralympics for Los Angeles 2028. But they only took in one new parasport, and it ended up being paraclimbing. So the next cycle of possibility for parasurfing to get into the Paralympics will be the Australia cycle. That's the next Olympics after LA 2028. So that'll be 2032 in Brisbane. Fingers crossed that parasurfing gets into that cycle, because that would open up more funding opportunities for parasurfers around the world if it does get into the Paralympics.
Yeah, I've been following a lot of it. It's incredible. I mean, so when the comp was on up at APS, Snowdonia, I happened to be working there. I think that was actually the last season it was fully open. And it's absolute inspiration to watch. And I can never remember the guy's name. Want to say he's a Brazilian surfer for the lower body amputee. Absolutely.
And was it Nackman?
Surfing, possibly. I don't have your skills of retention when it comes to information. But yeah, this guy was just absolutely shredded. Like, if you stood from a distance and you couldn't see the fact that he had his prosthetic leg on, you're like, that guy absolutely shreds. Like, you wouldn't have known. It's only until you get up close, you're like, what? Like, the guy surfs like circles around myself, and yeah, it's absolutely inspirational. And then, so I know Dino Griffiths from, well, it was sort of Surf Shop. He's now moving on, which is a bit of an end of an era, to be honest. But so he coaches Zoe Smith and Mark Haggett from Bournemouth way. And watching those two come along is absolutely incredible. And it's nice to see someone from your own hometown, isn't it, sort of take on these challenges, like go through something horrific and then come out of it, and it's taken them to like new heights where they might.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark and Zoe, I've got to commentate on their surfing at the last few ISA World events, and Zoe won a world title last year in Huntington, so that was really special. And Mark he's got a long history of surfing, so I love watching Mark because he's got an incredible read of the waves, and that really shines. So you see that with someone like Jesse Balawa as well. Jesse is a famous parasurfer from California who was a top-level junior before having a spinal cord injury while surfing. And then his work in parasurfing has been game-changing. He's one of the pioneers of the modern adaptive surf scene. But what's really incredible about watching the likes of Mark and Jesse is there'll be subtle upper body movements that will initiate their prone surfing maneuvers. But you can see that between what they're watching and what they're thinking and doing, there's like this incredible intrinsic awareness of wave shapes and, surfing in the pocket. And that really stands out. If you're a lover of surfing and you watch both of those, not only have they got style, they've got a really great read of the waves, and that's born from their long history of surfing since kids. Yeah, Jesse is part of that generation of surfers, and what's been special is post his spinal cord injury, he founded the Life Rolls On Foundation, and that's really been heavily supported by his kind of network of surfers from his generation, which includes Rob Machado. So he surfed some pretty extreme waves, prone surfing, and I call him the kind of the Zen master of parasurfing, because he's got that Jerry Lopez style of kind of precision where he's smooth and he's just got this kind of beautiful style and flow. And he rides boards designed by Bob Hurley, and they're almost like spaceships. They're these often black carbon fiber boards. And I think it really demonstrates how within the parasurf scene, you have the highest level of focus from the equipment and the engineering. And my good friend, Ben Way, who is a commentator and a surfboard shaper, developer of the wave skates, shortboards, really cool dude, really close friend of mine. I often room share with him when I work at ISA events. He designs and shapes incredibly good para boards, and a lot of people have won world titles on his boards. And there is so much thought that goes into the crafting of adaptive surfboards. It's really exciting, and you feel as if we're only just scratching the surface with that. If there's more funding available through the Paralympic movement, then more specialist parasurfing shapers can get on board to work with the athletes and experiment with different materials and really push all of the adaptation of all of the different styles of boards, from prone belly boards through to foam bodyboards through to full-blown seated surfboards, blending all of the things we're learning about rail edges, contours, fins with different types of materials. I think that's like a super exciting element. And, any shapers listening in, I would recommend, find your local parasurfer in your community and start working with them, because you'll probably get a lot of reward out of, the feedback you're going to get with working with the likes of Zoe Smith or Melissa Reed or Pegleg Bennett, Charlotte Bamfield, Mark Hager, all of these, established names in British parasurfing. They really need the support of the shapers, and the shapers will get a lot of satisfaction out of working with them, because it's such an interesting kind of part of wave riding, and it mixes so many different approaches from, shortboarding, bodyboarding to longboarding.
Yeah, that's brilliant about the parasurfing. We mentioned earlier style and flow. So on that, how's Lola getting on with being one of the most stylish longboarders out there? It seems like she's been absolutely smashing it and having a great time traveling. Yeah, how's her year lining up?
Yeah, that's really exciting to see, my daughter kind of rising up through the kind of longboard scene. And she's always loved riding longboards. When she was small, we tried shortboards, mid-lengths, and she just felt most at home on big boards, and pretty quickly she was pretty good with the footwork. And I think that's like the building block to longboarding. If you're into cross stepping, then your longboard is the right tool for you. And she's also really strong in bigger surf, and so she's got super comfortable over the years at riding her longboard in fairly big conditions, and that's really nice as well. It's not for her just a small wave tool. She likes to use a big board to really put it on rail on bigger days. And she's been doing competitions for a while now, and this season she got in a open final on the new European Tour of Longboarding quite recently in Portugal, and that was really special to see that level of result. She's had finals at the junior level European wide, being second and third at the European Junior Championships, but to get in an open final at the age of 17 felt like a really special result. And I think I never put any pressure on her about the results. It's more about her surfing nicely, fulfilling her potential, her talent, improving all the time, and really figuring out how she uses surfing in her life, how it allies with her other interests. She's studying an art diploma at the moment, and she might want to study art at university. And if she can find a way of kind of marrying, the opportunities to use surfing to compete as well as to kind of do her creative things that she's passionate about, then that's the most important thing from my perspective at how they kind of link together. And you talked about style and flow, and I think all longboarders aspire to look stylish and have that element of flow. And I think that's where documenting longboarding can really shine. You may not always win the competitions, but if you've got good style, then you're going to be able to create strong content with photographers and filmmakers. And I think Lola's got quite a dynamic, powerful, expressive style that's feminine and graceful, but at the same time it really has like presence. And she's got a really nice kind of down carve turn and cut back, and her nose riding is getting better all the time. And it's just linking it together so that the type of surfing you can do in a free surf, you can also do under pressure in a competition. And that's something that everybody is seeing amazingly with Ben Skinner, someone who is able to, under pressure, do the best surfing he can possibly do. And that takes a lot of mental strength, but it also takes the muscle memory of having free sessions where you relentlessly try things so that you know what it feels like to take the risk of a hang 10 through a steep section, and you trust your board and you don't mind falling when you're practicing. And that's something that is so important when you're surfing, no matter what level you're at, is to embrace the wipeout. The wipeout's part of the whole fun of surfing, and wiping out is as much a part of every ride as standing up. And I think that with longboarding, what's really cool is seeing how deep in the section you can try a nose ride. And if the wave's quite small and sucky, there's absolutely nothing that's going to hurt you by trying to see how sucky a section you can get the hang 10 in, because the place where you do the best hang 10s is the place you think that it would be unmakeable. And it's exactly at that moment where you have that mental barrier of there's no way I can stay on the nose through this section. They're exactly the sections where you do the lifting hang 10s, because the tail of your board is being pressed down by the breaking curl of the wave, and you're getting that lift, and you're literally just only like inches ahead of the curl. And that's the spot where those really amazing hang 10s happen. And yes, you might fall in the process of trying them, but if it's small and you're on a sand bottom wave, then enjoy the wipeouts and the feeling of those lifting 10s in sucky sections. They're exactly why we love longboarding.
Yeah, exactly. Like, growth comes from failure, doesn't it? If you don't fail, you're not going to get that learning curve. And I mean, the other night at the Volume 3 launch for Longboarder Magazine, that shot you had of Ben Skinner in competition, and everyone, I think, was just gobsmacked, weren't they? Like, those that come to the launch night that hadn't maybe seen that clip, not everyone watches the competitions. There was like, you could just hear like the mumblings of, is he going to come off the nose? Like, and then obviously the commentators as well at the event were just like, basically look at this guy from England, like really showing how a hang 10 is done. And it's almost like you just put this rock solid figurine on the end of a board. Like his posture was incredible, like just holding so still, like he is frozen in time, and just absolutely mental. But yeah, you're right, putting in the sets and the reps when you're just out there enjoying it for the moment. The more you do it, the more you're going to start off with, the more you're going to fall. But the more you fall, the more you learn. So if you can get comfortable with that, go, oh, well, yeah, I had too much weight. I could have done with, when I felt that wave slowing off, step back, even if it's just dropping back into a 5 rather than a 10. The more you do it, the more you get a feeling, don't you? And it's, you can surf off the feeling again, off the flow of the wave. So yeah, no, 100%. It's so stylish. It was incredible. So we mentioned at the launch night last week, which was absolutely brilliant. And it's also the first time I've actually been down to see the new shop, which is looking really good. I love the spot in Lantique, great area. How did you feel the launch went? Like, it was a brilliant evening. So it'd be nice to get your perspective as well, hearing about your dad as well and his story. It was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that we've gone into the 3rd issue of the magazine, and we've printed it around this time each year. I work on it through the summer, the autumn, into the winter. So I work on it over a long period of time and commission the pieces, engage with the contributors, gather all of the content before Christmas, and slowly edit it after Christmas, and then deliver it to the designer's temple, and then collaborate with them until we're ready to send it to the printers. So it's quite a long period of the year where I'm working on it, but slowly but surely. And the fact that we've already done 3 issues is fantastic. And big thanks to Chris and Teresa for publishing it and supporting print, because it's not cheap to print magazines, and it's quite a heavyweight magazine, so it's international in scope, but it also means it's not cheap to send it internationally. So that can be a barrier for people because they are hoping it will be cheaper, but we're trying to create something that stands the test of time. So each issue has pieces that you enjoy reading over a long period of time, and there's a full spectrum of international interest in each volume, particularly the latest one. And it was really nice to have a cool event just to show the previous content we've had in the magazine, but also just to share a little bit of my own journey into longboarding. And obviously every generation is time specific to how and where they grew up and what influences came to them. I'm 46, so I was born in 1978 and started surfing in the early 80s. So when the longboard renaissance was happening in the late 80s and early 90s, of the first generation of stand-up surfers, like my dad's generation, getting back into longboarding, I was amongst the group of younger longboarders in Europe who got on that kind of movement, people who'd learnt on shortboards but got excited by seeing what the likes of Wingnut, Tom Wegner and Joel Tudor and Cassia Medor, who's kind of really part of my generation, Carla Rowland Zamora, Belinda Baggs. We were in that group of people who were like wanting to be punk and energized, but still ride longboards. And so sharing a few of the video clips that I know inspired me was really cool. And I felt like the people who came to that talk, the reactions I was hearing, I thought, wow, this is a cool formula. I'd love to do another talk really documenting longboard narratives by use of photos and videos and talking it through. And I've kind of bringing it through to the contemporary days, having worked as a commentator and seen, that incredibly long hang 10 from Ben Skinner whilst working there at Malibu for the World WSL Championships, and seeing the likes of Soleil Erico win world titles, and at the ISA event, seeing the likes of Eduard Del Pero, Kai Salas, Honolulu Bloomfield, Rachel Tilley win world titles. I actually think that competition is a really important part of longboard culture, and there are different styles of contests in longboard culture, from really expressive dance-like celebrations, a bit like the Mexi Log Fest, that really empower, as much creativity as possible, to the more formulaic WSL and ISA events. But both platforms really have kind of pushed longboard performance to new places. And that's really exciting. I've seen the likes of Ben Skinner and Kai Salas and Taylor Jensen, move through the generation I did where, we were riding very much all-rounder longboards that could surf in all conditions, to them developing designs that allow incredible lift in critical steep sections on the nose without the tail sliding out, but still allow them to express themselves through really powerful rail work using all of the wave. And the type of surfing you're seeing from those three men, Ben Skinner, Kai Salas and Taylor Jensen, right now is as good as they've ever surfed. And that's born of continual progression, continual going back to the shaping bay and tweaking and developing, and then continuing to surf at the highest level. And it's quite exciting to think that all three of those men are in their early 40s or late 30s. And we see the same with the new generation now of women coming through, from Rachel Tilley, Soleil Erico. We've got Emily Curry, Beth Layfield, Sylvie Puddifoot, Lola Bleakley coming up from the UK and Marley Harbour. And that they are really at a cool stage in global longboarding where there's this nice blend of the love and needs to be able to do really critical lifting nose rides through steep sections, but then to be able to do engaged rail work that allows that drive and that acceleration, and that mix of the two approaches to surfing with good footwork. I think it's one of the most beautiful styles of wave rider you can see, when you've got like a spinning kind of point break like wave and good dynamic longboarders mixing up, lifting nose rides with powerful rail turns. I could sit and watch that kind of surfing all day long.
Yeah, you reminded me of two DVDs that I watched when I got into surfing, which was Scratching the Surface, but the longboard version, and Hang. And I'm pretty sure I wore those two out, especially Hang. Like the amount of sort of, again, late 80s, 90s longboarders such as Dino Miranda, Bonga Perkins, I think Bo Young's in there as well. And especially Bo and Bonga. I think for me, on a global scale, those two have been quite inspirational, and why I keep coming back to always making sure I've got a longboard around. Like, I love my shortboarding. I love the performance side of it. Probably love it more than I'm actually good at it, but being able to take those maneuvers from a shortboard, trying to get as big a carve as you can, but then throwing on an extra 3 foot of board and doing that on a 9 foot something surfboard is a challenge and exciting at the same time. Like, I love the cross-stepping side of it, but I'm not the most graceful person, especially at 5'7" and almost as wide. Like, I don't have that long, slender look, which goes really well with the cross-stepping side of longboarding from an aesthetic point of view. But being able to get that body weight low on a bigger wave, sort of head and a half waves, I absolutely love it on a big board. And it allows me to really push onto that rail, really put as much power as I can, and know that the wave has the power to help guide me round. So yeah, it's good fun. It also allows you to get in that a little bit earlier and catch as many waves as possible, especially in a busy lineup. Yeah, it's having that blend's amazing. I think it's nice to see it coming back again. Like, as you've probably seen, it sort of ebbs and flows, doesn't it, over the years, and longboarding it'll go quiet for a little while, and then suddenly you'll have this another big resurgence, and it gets quite big. I mean, these days you've got so many different boards, haven't you? And it almost does look like Bonga Perkins Quiver. Everything from a 5'10" performance board through to maybe 10 foot, and every single shape and size in between. I think it was Hang, wasn't it? And he's just got a whole quiver on the beach. He just grabs one, goes out, has a few waves, come back, grabs another board that's completely different, goes and shreds. That to me encapsulates what surfing can be. Like, okay, that was different. It was one day, it was one size, but to be able to ride a variety of different boards on the same wave is absolutely incredible. Definitely a lifelong goal. So, what are your plans for the rest of the year? Is there anything coming up?
So I go into a phase of a lot of commentary work through the late half of the summer into the winter, because we have WSL events that I'll work at for the World Longboard Tour, and then I'll work at the ISA World Parasurfing Championships. And so that's a big element of my year is being available for those commentary jobs in longboarding and parasurfing. And then I kind of kick off the work again with the volume 4 of Longboarder Magazine. I take on various kind of freelance roles with bits of writing and hopefully more film work. I've got quite a legacy of things to do around the museum exhibition. But what I really do is just stay close to the bits of the surf community that, I'm interested in, and hopefully exciting new projects kind of come up connected to some of my specialism, from longboarding, parasurfing, things to do with like sustainable tourism and sustainability and mindfulness. And you mentioned, Bonga and Bo, and that as well. It's really important to keep the history alive. And that's something that I like to make sure I do with the different aspects of work, whether it's UK focused or international, is keep all those narratives alive, remind people of some of the pioneer female longboarders who have pushed boundaries. You remind people of the fact that Bonga won his 2 world titles in such different conditions, from huge Guittery in 1996 in France to beautiful small South Swell San Onofre in 2008 in California. And he really embodies a great blend of all of the Hawaiian greats who can ride all boards in all conditions, and a lovely person as well. And Bo also extremely versatile, and also a musician, and of course from a big surfing family. And I think that there's an increasing demand as surfing continues to grow of keeping history alive and sharing the stories, but also bringing attention to some of the unwritten histories, some of the pioneer female longboarders who have really paved the way. Somebody who, for me, is doing a lot of great work in longboarding is Carla Rowland Zamora, who runs the Queen of the Point competitions. And I think that she's really giving a platform to a new generation of female longboarders. And that's exciting. And, making sure that we continue to put a spotlight on some of the stories that haven't been told, and also to encourage us to engage with surfing in a positive way, to make sure that we are conscious about the equipment we're supporting, the shapers we're supporting, the type of wetsuits we're wearing, what the impact on the environment and the economy those items are having. And also, if we want to get involved in surf travel, being conscious of having a positive impact on the areas that we're going. And there are loads of surf camps now around the world that employ surf coaches, surf guides, photographers, and resort managers. And there are a lot of big opportunities for young surfers to get to know the likes of Central America and Asia and different parts of the world through surf travel. But being committed to making sure you're going to have a good impact on the place that you're going. Is it a place that benefits the local community positively? Have you done your research around choosing to work with this organization over that one, because that one is really doing some strong things for the economy, the environment, and the community? So all of those types of messaging, I think that's something that I like to be an ambassador for, to really kind of make people aware, as surfing continues to grow, the impact we have and the power we have as surf consumers to, make those decisions and support the right movements.
Yeah, it's so important that we sort of balance everything out, isn't it, in terms of sustainability? And I think it's exciting to see how the equipment, the mindset of different surf companies changes over and progresses over the next few years, to make sure that we get so much from the ocean. Like you say, it's nice to sort of give back and make sure that we're looking after it. I think what you said earlier about it's a shared space, I think that sometimes goes sort of under the radar a little bit. Like we take it for granted. It's there. We live on an island, essentially, a big island, but we're just used to it being there. So I think, yeah, like you say, if we can make sure we're doing what we can to give back to it, then we're just going to be doing good, aren't we? Which is what we want.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that theme of a shared space. It is getting more and more crowded, but we need to be working together in order to kind of deal with that increasing growth of wave riding. And you can understand why people love it and more people want to engage with it. But treating it as a shared space, I think, is really important, not just with other surfers, but with the environment, with the sea life. A philosophy that will help all of us if we go into it with that frame of mind.
100%. Look, we'll start winding this down now. I appreciate you're an extremely busy guy. If you can just give a couple of little pieces of advice, something that's helped guide you through your life, your surfing journey, maybe little nuggets of information that you've passed on to Lola and Ruben. If you could pass it on to the listeners, that'd be great.
I think the most important thing I try to share with the kids as they're learning to surf and have shared with them when they were smaller is just reading the sea before you start, really giving yourself enough time before a surf session to look at who's in, where they are, where the channel is, where the waves are breaking, if it's lefts or rights, if it's both, and where you might be paddling after your rides. And giving yourself a little bit of time to do that means that A, you're tuned into the conditions more, and B, you're going to stay out of people's way. You don't always have to surf the same peak as everybody else if there's 3 other peaks that are less crowded further down the beach. And also recognizing that it's not always about having a load of pressure on your performance. It's just enjoying the fact that, a good knee paddle, a good turtle roll, a good duck dive, a good sit up and watch a rainbow is as valuable as a good ride. If you start to really enjoy all those other elements of getting change, of walking across the sand, of paddling out as much as the ride, then you'll come out of the session in a much more positive space. I see a lot of people put quite a lot of pressure on their own performance, and they get anxious and frustrated, and they're not relaxed and they're tense. And sometimes letting go of your own expectations and just really appreciating the bigger picture of everything from arriving at the coast to leaving, that being the whole experience, sometimes then you're going to have a much more rewarding session. So I think reading the sea is probably the best bit of advice, and just giving yourself the time before you paddle out to look at the conditions and start to become aware of, there's the channel. I'm probably going to be getting lefts today. I'm probably going to be able to paddle right around and stay out of everyone's way. If I'm not getting waves in that pack, maybe I'll move down to this peak because there's nobody riding it. The waves may be a little bit worse, but probably going to get more rides down there because there's only 2 people on it as opposed to 30 on the peak that I'm going to start at. Those types of things come from just really giving yourself the time to read the sea.
Yeah, hands down. And from the personal training point of view, if you can throw in a little warm-up, that'd be good, guys. If, like me, you're approaching 40, you definitely need to get them joints nice, loose and limber. I think, yeah, you're right. And from someone that used to get a little bit stressed out or anxious in the water at times, I've started using my time, like that first duck dive or first turtle roll, as that water washes over you, I use that to sort of let go. Anything that I'm dealing with on land gets washed off, stays on land. I go, have my surf, and then just enjoy it for what it is, no matter what the conditions are. Look, Sam, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on, mate. I know I'll take on as much information as I can, and hopefully listeners do as well. If they want to follow you, what's the best way to do that?
I think a great thing to do is to watch the WSL Brilliant Corners films, and you can find links to those on my Instagram, which is at Sam Bleakley 1. And you can also go to the watch area of the World Surf League website and find the Brilliant Corners films. And that really gives a good overview of kind of my philosophy, my role. I think heading down to the Maritime Museum exhibition in Falmouth and enjoy the show called Surf, which is on until January 2027, celebrating the history of wave riding in Cornwall, is nice. And maybe supporting the Longboarder Magazine and tuning into the World Longboard Tour. I'll normally be commentating on the annual ISA World Parasurfing Champs. So those different types of platforms are good ways of kind of seeing the different things that I do and the community work that I do, and the way I engage with longboarding and parasurfing and surf culture more broadly.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, when this gets released, all the links will be down in the description. Once again, thanks for that, Sam. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honour having you on. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what's happening over the coming months.
Thanks so much for having me, Ross. It's been an absolute pleasure. Good to chat. And yeah, see you soon.